Hey folks, and welcome to another episode of Podcraft. This is the show all about podcasting, from launching your show to monetization and all the bits in between and making it a success. I'm Colin Gray from thepodcasthost.com, joined by Matthew. As always, how are you getting on, Matthew?
Yeah, very well. Well done on doing that intro in one take. Congratulations.
I almost tripped over a word there. I changed one of the words. I was like, oh, I don't know why. Not sure. You know, just take a notion sometimes.
Yep. You got there though. You did it. We're set up and ready to go.
Indeed. How are you this week? You well?
Yeah, not too bad, thanks. Yeah.
Good.
The old summer here. It's a bit tumultuous is the word I would use. Like some days you get a decent day and other days it's just a bit grey and windy and that. So what about your way?
Are you describing Scotland in general?
Pretty much, yeah.
It's just us.
Any month.
Yeah, exactly the same. Roasting last week and now freezing and raining. All right, let's get something more predictable than the Scottish weather, though, and that's our topics. How do you like that segment, Matthew?
I like that. Very good.
So this week we're going to talk about clickbait, essentially, and creating really engaging episode titles. That kind of walking the tightrope between creating an episode title that's super engaging, super clicky, super actionable, but actually not going over the line and turning into clickbait, because it's a real balance, isn't it, Matthew? Like, it's a tricky thing to walk the line on.
Yeah, it sure is. Yeah, and I mean, you've obviously got, as we'll get into, like the title itself, but also titles of things like graphics or that. If you're creating other content around your episode. So yeah, there's always a tightrope here, isn't there? Which I'm sure we're going to get into today.
Indeed, yeah. We'll make sure to put some examples in, some sort of rules of thumb, ways that you can help to make your episode titles much more effective in future without walking that line or without stepping over that line, I suppose. And then we've got a couple of updates around the work that we do at the end as well. Something around a few new things we're trying out in our community, which might translate to you out there if you're running community or trying to engage listeners more as well. And a bit of news around a wee appearance we got on the internet around Alitu as well, which was a nice surprise. So yeah, we'll get to all of that over this episode. I'll jump in before we do that just to mention that this is obviously supported, all of the content we do is supported by the work we do, and one of those is coaching. So if you are looking to launch your podcast, or you're looking to grow your podcast, or basically anything, needing help around your podcast, we can possibly help. So we have two levels. We have our Podcraft Academy, which has lots of group coaching, lots of tools and services in there to actually let us help you to improve your podcast, right from launch stage right up to monetization and growth, make it a success. That's over at thepodcasthost.com/academy. But we also do coaching too. And if you want to get our actual one-to-one help, just pop over to thepodcasthost.com/help, and you can fill in a form that'll tell us the kind of things you're looking for, and we can figure out how we can help you out. So yeah, pop over to thepodcasthost.com/help to fill out that form, and we'll see how we can get involved and make your podcast a success. Perfect. All right. This is your topic. So do you want to jump into this? You were the one that suggested this. I think it was coming out of a little misunderstanding that we had with someone recently, wasn't it? But we'll get to that. We'll tease that. There's our clickbaity bit. But what's the kind of thinking behind this topic?
So yeah, podcasting, one of its main strengths is the ability to have real depth and nuance in any topic that you're kind of dealing with or discussing. But that doesn't necessarily translate to titles. And, you know, we're competing in this attention economy just like everything else. Your title is obviously very important for getting people to consume your content. So like we've said in the intro there, Colin, you've got this tightrope, don't you, between how compelling something could be versus are you then starting to just mislead or outright lie? So I think you've got a few examples here of what constitutes clickbait, don't you? I see you've noted a couple down.
Yeah. I wanted to put a few examples in. There were some real actually, and a few made up ones just to highlight a few different ways to do it as well. So yeah, you're absolutely right. It's just around like, how do you get that attention? Because we're competing for attention with so many different mediums and so many different podcasts as well. So there's a few examples here. Like, have you heard of this one, Matthew? So there was one around Mark Wahlberg. So the headline was Mark Wahlberg's $20 million villain role. obviously suggesting that he got paid $20 million for a specific film. But it turned out the publication, I'm not going to name the publication, no point outing these people, but it actually referred to the actual whole film's box office gross income. So not Mark Wahlberg's were earnings, but the actual earnings for the entire film. So a little bit manipulative there, because technically that's true. So this is a misleading headline. Technically it's true because it's a 20 million villain role, because it's like the film was 20 million, but actually it's absolute nonsense because it's really suggesting that that's what he earned himself. So things like that is just like misleading the reader. It's suggesting something to draw you in because it sounds a bit sensationalist, and it turns out when you're in there, actually it's complete nonsense. It's not true at all. Here's another one you might have actually heard of, though, Matthew. Have you heard the headline, Freddie Starr ate my hamster?
Yeah, I think there was there like a Commodore 64 game called Rockstar Ate My Hamster. I'm assuming it was kind of based on this, but I honestly didn't know until this moment what the origins of the saying was. So it was a headline.
It was a real thing. Yeah, totally. Yeah, I didn't realise this either, actually, but it was, I'm going out this one because it's the Sun. So they're expected to do crazy headlines. So newspaper, the Sun, it's kind of the old school version of the blog, obviously. So headlines in the newspaper were just the exact same. We're trying to, gather attention. We're trying to draw the eyes and make you buy the paper. And it claimed, obviously, comedian Freddie Starr had eaten a fan's hamster. And it was later revealed it was a complete lie. It was completely made up. So the Sun just put that on for no particular reason apart from just to draw some eyeballs. And that was one of the first, I don't know whether it was the first or one of many things that eroded trust in the Sun's reporting. And a last one I'll share here of a real one was actually a publication I read a fair bit. Do you read The Verge at all, Matthew?
No, I don't actually. No. I mean, I see it about a lot, but no.
Yeah, really good. I like it. I like the website. It's a great kind of tech reporting site. Do some good podcasting and stuff like that as well. But apparently one of their headlines when a new iPhone came out was Apple's new iPhone is the worst one ever. So designed to reveal intrigue, designed to sort of draw you in, designed to suggest that something's really dramatic here. But it turned out, actually, when you read it, the review was pretty balanced. The headline was pure clickbait. It was, it was just purely trying to draw people in. And then actually you read it and it was like, there's a couple of worse features, but it's fine. The phone is totally fine. So, yeah, there was a big backlash on that one, actually, Matthew. They had to update the headline because they got so much back from readers and tech enthusiasts and stuff that made them actually change it. So that's one result of potentially clickbaity headlines.
Yeah, good examples. Yeah, and that, like you're saying there, you've got the misleading one, you've got the outright lie, and then you've got the exaggeration. So it shows again that with these things, there's different categories of clickbait, isn't there? So
yeah, different types. Yeah. So tell me then, what was it brought this up? What was it happened with our one? And let's dig into kind of how we can kind of think about this and what tips we might be able to bring out of it based on what actually happened with your one.
Yeah, I mean, this is potentially storm in a teacup stuff compared to what we've just, like the headlines we've just talked about. But so we released our episode on championing spoken word audio, which, if you're a podcast listener, which you obviously are, you'll have no doubt heard that episode. It was our Vox Pop one. So the title of the episode and the corresponding blog with the show notes was Do We Need to Champion Spoken Word Audio in a World of Video Hype? So I'm not sure if it was this that got a couple of not so positive comments or whether it was the social media graphic. So I'm not on LinkedIn, but Katie was passing this on to me. So she'd posted the stuff up on LinkedIn, and on the graphic that was leading to this article, it asked the question, is audio being left behind? And then, it set the premise up and encouraged the reader to go and click onto the article or the podcast episode. So one commenter responded that this polarised discussion is not really helpful, which I didn't really understand. I felt that was maybe responding to the title rather than the content itself. One of the other comments that jumped out to me was, is audio being left behind has to be one of the dumbest questions ever posed on this topic. So again, I don't really know where this is coming from. I didn't really feel they were fair comments, but again, I'm always learning, and if we did something wrong here, I'd be keen to at least take it on board for future content. So what's your thoughts, Colin? Was I at fault here? Surely not.
No, of course not. No, I mean, I think there's a couple of sides to this. I think part of the worry or part of the risk with those more, so one type of potential clickbait is when you kind of pile on to an existing bit of hype or an existing conversation, So there's a debate, there's a controversy, there's something going on in the world. It's a bit like that newsjacking type approach where you take something current and you try and build on that to try and gather attention, because people notice things that reflect something really important that's going on in the world right now. And one of the really important things going on in our world at the moment in podcasting is the video versus audio debate. And I think it's a nonsense debate, because it's not audio versus video. They both work really well together, and they can work really nicely in all sorts of ways together. And that was a big part of what your article was around. But the fact that you had the title "Is Audio Being Left Behind" was definitely jumping on that debate, was definitely using that debate to try and gain some traction. And there's always going to be a set of people who are fed up with the debate or they've been involved in the debate so much that they've become completely polarized over their view of it as well. So I think as soon as you kind of jump onto a debate like that and use it for a title to grab attention, which is a good way to grab attention in many ways, like I suggest people should do this actually in most cases if they do it sensitively, if they use a current event, a current topic, something that's really in the zeitgeist. That's a really good way to get attention and to get people listening to your episodes. But if you do that, you've probably got to be aware that there's going to be people that have become polarized around it, and there's going to be people that have become fed up with it. And both of them are probably going to comment negatively on your post. So that's one side, certainly. Does that make sense?
Totally, yeah, totally. And I kind of said to Kate at the time, like, I'm not, as much as we're talking about it now, I said it doesn't concern me, because I think this is just a byproduct of attention. And I don't think we've gained that attention unfairly or by doing anything wrong. And I think this is just the nature of the beast sometimes, that people, like you're saying, they're maybe they've got assumptions about what you're saying based on the things that they've been discussing before, and that's just part and parcel of the internet and social media, I suppose. So this is
it. Your goal's to attract in the people that are willing to read the whole thing, isn't it? That's the whole point of a headline. It's to encourage people to read the whole thing. And many are not. Many are just going to see the headline and get something in their head straight away and respond based on that. And the sad thing is that as creators, as people that publish things on the internet, we need to develop a bit of a thick skin, because we're always going to get people that completely misunderstand the thing we do, or just start playing mean and trolling, essentially. I don't think either of these comments, just to be clear, well, actually one of them was, I think the first comment you mentioned around, the polarized debate, I think that was well-intentioned. The guy that did that we know really well, and he actually was quite constructive about it after that. I think he just didn't really quite get the kind of nuance behind the article, potentially. I haven't read it all, potentially, I'm not sure, but or he was just fed up, which many of us are, with this debate, and we're just like, just move on, just make the thing that's best for your show. The other one I think was just plain trolling, actually, because it was like, is audio being left behind? And he was claiming it was nonsense because audio is in video as well, but that wasn't the idea at all, was it?
Yeah.
It's like he was saying, who publishes video without audio, which is completely against the point.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair to the second commenter as well, I think he did then return with what he felt was a more appropriate title.
Oh, really?
And that would be up for debate, I suppose. But yeah, just looking for that much more balanced but much more less compelling title. And again, I don't necessarily think the title was unbalanced. I think it was just posing a question. But yeah.
I think there's a couple of rules of thumb here that we can decide whether this is, we'll go through our rules of thumb. I want to give a wee example of my own first as well, before we jump into the kind of takeaways, the lessons learned here. But let's run your title here, is audio being left behind, through our rules of thumb and see in a second. But we'll jump into that. Hold on, though. I want to give my little example. So something that, there was two parts to this really, which kind of brought this home to me as well, which was, The first part was a data report. So it was a data report, a really good report actually by Coleman Insights and Amplify. And it was, the report was called the State of Video Podcasting Report 2025. So the whole point of the report was to look into video podcasting specifically. So I already had a bit of a, potentially a bit of a bias there, because they're obviously doing a video podcasting report for a particular reason, to look into video podcasting. So who knows, maybe a bit of bias there. But actually, I'll take that back, because I think that talking to the team that actually put this report together, I think it was all good intent, and it was just actually exactly as we were saying. It was just trying to find headlines that actually gather some attention and get some eyes on this data, and there was no negative thing intended here. But the trouble was, even if you don't have negative intent, a bad headline or a misleading headline can still have negative results or negative consequences. And one of them in particular stood out to me because it was a graph that asked the question, or a bar chart here that asked the question, how do you consume podcasts? And I'll include this in the show notes actually, so I'll have a link to this in the show notes if you want to have a look at the actual data. But the question was, how do you consume podcasts? And the answers were potentially, will you choose from only audio, or mostly audio, sometimes video, or audio and video equally, or mostly video, sometimes audio, or only video. And they chose to use the headline for this: only 10% of Gen Z never consume video podcasts. So only 10% of Gen Z never consume video podcasts. So what's the intimation there, Matthew?
That 90% are.
Yeah, exactly. 90% of Gen Z are consuming video podcasts. And the intimation potentially is like, that's all they consume. They all want video podcasts. So the data is right. Like, this is a correct headline. This is the thing. And it's worthwhile pointing this out. So there's only 10% of Gen Z have never watched a video podcast, but it does mean, 90% of Gen Z have watched at least one video podcast ever, which is kind of like, who's not watched a video podcast at this point? And the other data actually shows, like, a more balanced analysis of the data would be 10% of Gen Z listen to audio only versus 7% watching video only. So actually more listen to audio only versus 7% that watch video only. 31% of Gen Z listen to mostly audio versus 30% mostly video. So actually the balance is actually more towards audio than video in their data. 31% versus 30%. Which is mostly audio versus mostly video, and 22% consume audio and video equally. So 1 in 5 Gen Zer actually consumes them both equally. And there's more balance, more weight on the audio only side than the video only side. So, at the end of the day, almost those stats, like 10 to 7%, 31 to 30%, it's all pretty near equal split in preference. And they've just picked out one particular part, which is the only video, to put the headline around. So it's cherry picking essentially the data that creates the most kind of attention grabbing headline. And I understand why. Again, I don't think there was negative intent here. It was just to get people to look at the data. But the trouble is, a lot of people, as we're trying to share here, a lot of people only look at the headline and don't actually look at the data. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people might actually take that away and think, oh no, I need to make a video podcast because 90% of Gen Zers are mostly consuming video. So what am I going to do when I need to try and reach that younger generation?
So what, you're talking about this report. So what then happened? You commented on it. Did you get a bad response for making a comment, or what kind of panned out?
Yeah. So the kind of 2-layer part of it is that I then created a LinkedIn post to talk about this. It's kind of one of my hobby horses because I'm an actual, technically a professional researcher. I've got a PhD, which means that basically a PhD trains you just to be a researcher. So I've done 3 years of training plus 5 to 10 years before that in academia around how to do proper academic reports and stuff like that. So I know a bit about this, how to create a good database report. But also I kind of hate the idea of people sort of cherry bad understanding of stats and bad understanding of reports and things like that. So I wanted to call it out, and I think I did it in a okay, so here's what I did. You tell me what you think on it. I used a line at the top. What was it I started with? I said something like, because on LinkedIn, again, it's like the headline, you've got to try and draw in the listener in the first line or two. So my first line was something along the lines of, is there a touch of how to lie with statistics going on here? I don't think this tells the true story at all. And that was basically the headline for the LinkedIn post. And the How to Lie with Statistics is referencing a really famous book around this. There's a book called How to Lie with Statistics that really goes into all of this. And it's the whole intent is that you're not lying, actually. You're telling the truth based on what the stats say. And that's what this report does. It tells, like, that headline is true. 10% of Gen Z never consumes video podcasts because they're only consuming audio. But it's it's picking that out on its own, the intimation, the suggestion itself. Like, is it a lie, Matthew, if you, admit the truth and just tell part of the truth and suggest something? Tell me what your wife would say.
Oh, Christ, that's a whole rabbit hole there.
The response I got to that, I had one particular, funnily enough, the people that wrote the report actually replied to me, and we had a really good conversation around it. Like, they were really respectful, and I was obviously respectful in return. And I think the actual post itself was respectful too. The thing that one other person commented on really negatively was just the word lie, essentially. It was the fact that I put lie in. And I like, so maybe that is something. Let's go through the rules in a second. We'll see what it says. But maybe the word lie was misplaced there. I don't know if it was. My intent was to suggest, it says a touch of How to Lie with Statistics, and it was referring to the book where there's a lot of different intent behind it. The intent is not that people do actually lie. But then how many people have read that book? Probably hardly anyone. So maybe I should have rethought that a little bit. But yeah, that was just one example. Yeah.
I like the title of that book because it has a double meaning, like how to lie as in, lie down and make yourself comfortable with. I think that's the double meaning there, unless I'm just looking too much into it.
I have never even considered that.
Yeah. How do you lie
you're
with
relaxing
statistics?
down. Relax down with your statistics, like
settle into them and let them wash over you like a duvet. I'm mixing the metaphors there, but
Right, takeaways. What do we actually learn from this? Let's go through it. I've got a couple of rules of thumb, I think, as well. So, but you've got a few takeaways here that you got from your initial one. What were you thinking around it? Like, what do you think we can take into our podcast episode naming, our show notes titles naming, our blog post naming, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, like I've heard this quote before: attention is the gateway to value. Like, you still do need to click. And we're obviously, I think the listener will know by now, we're not encouraging clickbait by any means, but you still need to click, don't you? Like, if no one clicks, no one engages, you could be creating the best stuff ever with the most boring, mundane attempt to be balanced and please everyone titles, and then your content just never gets seen or read or watched or listened to. So that's a real shame, isn't it?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And again, you're right. It's not permission to clickbait, but you need to actually compete for that attention. So yeah, there's something around being able to bring in this intrigue, this curiosity, this attention without without going over the line. Otherwise, yeah, exactly. What's the point? No one's going to read it ever. Yeah.
And then we can take solace in the fact that, like, podcasts are very nuanced. Our content itself, we've got the time to get into a topic and cover all angles if we need to. We could have a long form discussion if we disagree on things. So we've got this tremendous benefit that even other mediums, like, how long are you going to get, even in a video, to lay out all this nuance? So it's great that we've got that, but your title, you've still got 60 characters or whatever to try and convey that in and make it compelling and give a hook. So yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, it's so hard actually, because I find this every time we create an episode, and particularly with podcasting, because you tend to cover, you often cover more than one topic. So actually you're trying to bring in, more than one bit of nuance, more than one, suggestion of what you're going to cover, or suggestion of what the value is that you're going to give. So yeah, really tricky indeed. Yeah.
I used to laugh at one of the podcasters that I listened to years ago, and he tended to cover a lot of different topics, and they were all really good, but he struggled to convey the full value in his topics. So he ended up always saying, this and this and this and much, much more. And I was always thinking, imagine the person clicking, because there's much, much more in this. I need to hear it.
It's like clickbait in itself.
Yeah, it's like meta clickbait. But I also, I think I've mentioned this before, like I listened to a couple of podcasts that are kind of YouTube first. That are still really good audio podcasts, but some of them kind of lift the curtain a wee bit and talk about the ins and outs of YouTube and how it's a whole world of itself, like thumbnails and that. And, I hear a lot of unhappiness just with how they feel about like how they feel they have to title stuff basically to cater to the algorithm, and they're not particularly happy with their titles, but they do well, and then they try titles that they're more happy with and they just don't do well, and that costs them a lot of views and therefore a lot of money. So yeah, it's like, again, they're walking a bigger tightrope than us if you're predominantly on YouTube, I suppose. So
yeah, you've got to be shorter on YouTube. I think that's the general rule, and repeating titles tends to be quite a big thing. Like if you see on if you're a health and fitness channel and you see on a sports or a baseball channel or something like 12 ways to hold your baseball bat, and that does really well, you change it to 12 ways to hold your barbell, like you take the format and you repurpose it to your own. And that's a really big thing in YouTube. You see that going around. You see these titles that just go right across different niches, and it just looks really cheesy when you see them side by side. But you have to take the ones that are proven to work. Yeah. So let's run it through this rule of thumb. I think the one rule, really, there's maybe more, but the one kind of core one is, do you deliver on it? Do you deliver on the promise? Like, that's kind of, go back to those example ones like Mark Wahlberg's 20 million villain role. Are you delivering on that promise? No, you're turning it around. You're misleading. You're not, somebody will try and argue, yeah, it was $20 million in the box office, blah, 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 but it's nonsense. Particularly that Sun one, Freddie Starr ate my hamster. He didn't eat a hamster, didn't deliver on the promise. And Apple's new iPhone is the worst one ever. Nope, they say actually it wasn't the worst one ever in the end. It was just a sensationalist headline. So they're not delivering on the promise. So like, look at your one. Is audio being left behind? In the article, in the content itself, do you deliver on that promise? And do you answer that question, or do you at least give a balanced view on the answer to that question?
Yeah, nearly 30 people answered that question and they didn't all agree. So I like to think it did deliver.
Yeah, perfect. So, I mean, I think that's the general rule. I think that's all you need to do. As long as you're delivering on the promise, if you create a headline, look back at it and say, does this actually come through? Will people be disappointed? Like an honest view. Can you give this to your mum, your granny, somebody that you'd be very hurt to deceive? And would they tell you that this actually delivers on that promise, or maybe it's your harshest critic. You need to give it to that and say, like, can you honestly tell yourself that this is delivering on that promise? I think that's the biggest one. And I think the other part of it is like to kind of walk that tightrope a bit. I think of the idea is tease, but don't lie. Obviously, like no one goes in intentionally lying, but if you just tease some value and then you make sure you're delivering on the promise, then generally you won't be lying. And then if you sort of check yourself with that, make sure it's not actually just kind of sensationalist, it's misleading, it's lying, then you should be all good. And you can still try and garner some attention without stepping over that line. Yeah. All right. Anything else to cover on that? Or do you think that's about it?
No, I don't think so. I think I would end up just repeating myself again and again and spiral into oblivion. So
perfect.
And plus I have some other things to ask you about, one of which I'm particularly interested to hear about. So the academy, like the
updates.
Podcraft Academy, been doing a couple of wee things in there, haven't we? So one that I was particularly interested in, because it sounds like something about Warhammer 40k, is the Click Catalyzer.
Nice. Yeah, I think there's a couple of things I wanted to share here publicly because, well, partly because we'd love people to join the academy. So that's part of it. I won't lie about that. Tease, don't lie, not be clickbaity. But equally, I think this applies to anyone out there. If you're out there running a community or you're creating products to actually try and monetize your podcast, which many podcasters do, one of the best ways to do it is to create your own products or create community, that kind of thing. There might be a couple of things to learn from here. The Click Catalyzer is, it's a headline, attention grabbing, kind of what we've been talking about here, but it delivers by being your title clinic. So what I've been trying to think about is how we help podcasters. The coaching we give, the help that we offer, like how to actually turn that into more obvious services or more obvious products. And one of the things we help a lot with is title SEO. So episode titles actually are a really important thing, aren't they, Matthew? Like you need to make sure your episode titles and your podcast are really important. We've just talked for half an hour about how you can potentially do that to get more attention. the SEO side of it as well, being found in Apple Podcasts, stuff like that. So we give a lot of help around titles. Like what's one of the biggest things we offer that coaching around when we do a podcast audit or something like that, we tell people how to make their titles better. So I've tried to make a little service around this and called it the Click Catalyzer, because the whole idea is we're going to catalyze them some more clicks by helping with the titles. So the product is, it's a space within our community with a template where you can post. You post your current episode idea, you post what your podcast is about, and you post what your rough title is, your first idea for a title is. And then our promise is we get back to you and we give you a few suggestions to actually to create a great title. So it's productizing this service, the service being we help people with titles, but it's turning it into a product because I'm putting a structure around it, I'm putting a name around it, a brand around it, all that kind of stuff. And it makes it really easy for people to use. It makes it really obvious how it works and really straightforward and quick for people to actually use it to help improve their titles every single week. So that's the kind of idea. If you're selling, products, you're selling services, it's actually a really nice idea to add brand to those particular elements of it and to try and create a product around, even if it's something that you just do, it's just help, it's just coaching that you give. So the Click Catalyzer is one of those. Does that make more sense, Matthew?
Yeah, I'm definitely going to stick one on my Space Marine as well. So catalyzer, what's the definition? Is it like catabolic? Is that where it sort of came from?
A catalyst is like kind of creating something, I suppose. It's
catalyst and the chemistry term. Yeah.
Yeah,
right.
exactly. Yeah,
okay.
yeah. So it's like it's catalyzing you more clicks, creating you more clicks, like generating you more clicks. Yeah, that's exactly it.
Yeah. I'll still stick one on my Space Marine.
Yep, totally. Yeah. And the other one as well, have you come across Your Content Boss yet?
I read that as your content boss. He's just really happy with how things are going.
Content.
Let's talk about the content boss. He's a bit more ramped up and demanding. So what's his deal or her deal?
So your content boss is the same idea. Like a lot of communities that you join, a big part of being part of that community is accountability. It's around joining this community, sharing your goals, sharing your tasks, and then actually feeling like you've put something out in public to help you really stay accountable to completing it. And it does, it makes a huge difference. Like one of the biggest things I did in the early days of creating the podcast, was creating this company we run now, was I joined a particular community and I posted what I was doing every single week. And that was my accountability. I said, here's my goals for this week. Here's what happened last week. And people would comment on it. They'd give me some enthusiastic encouragement. They'd give me some, tips and suggestions, some feedback, all that kind of stuff. And that was really great. But I had to I had to figure out how to do that. I had to figure out my own format. I had to figure out how I wanted to do it, how it worked for me. There wasn't really much in the way of like structured feedback, or nobody held me accountable essentially if I didn't check in and say I'd done it. So my idea for our community is that, one of the biggest things podcasters always tell us they need help with is consistency. And we see it time and again. What's our survey, Matthew, that has that as one of the biggest success factors in podcasting?
Yeah, the IndiePod census, playing the long game was seen as like that. This is most likely to bring you success. So
yeah. Of all the tactics you can use to grow your podcast and make it a success, the most probably the most easy to control yourself and the most simple is actually just be consistent. Just get out every single week. So we want to help podcasters with that. And your content boss is basically, the idea is that, everyone wants to work for yourself. Everyone wants to be their own boss. But actually a boss is really, really good for making you stick to deadlines, for making you do your work, for helping you plan out projects, all that kind of thing. So we'll be your content boss inside the community. And again, we've got templates in there to help you post on a Monday, your check-in, what you're going to do, what your plan is, get some feedback on it. And then we're actually going to hold people accountable. So we're going to have a report card at the end of the week. And it's all kind of in a semi-tongue-in-cheek boss style format, like corporate boss style format. We'll do performance reviews, we'll do employee of the month, all this kind of thing, to help people stay on track, try and motivate people to actually stick to the things they say they're going to do week in, week out. Because if you're out there listening, there's no doubt been weeks where you've tried to put an episode out, you've committed to put an episode out, but it just hasn't happened. And that happens in life. But actually working with a team, working with people who will help, keep you accountable, give you feedback on what went wrong, what went right, all that kind of stuff, hopefully will help. And your content boss is another feature then of the academy to help you stay on track. So that's the idea.
And if they do well at it, we will be then their content boss.
Yes, we'll be very content. You don't want us to be your non-content boss.
Incontent.
Incontent,
Incompetent.
Discontent.
Incontinent.
Boss.
I'm the incontinent boss.
That's a different thing altogether. So I hope that is actually useful to many of you out there who's running communities or thinking about creating products to monetize your podcast. But equally, it's a little bit of an ad, I'll be honest, for our academy as well. If you think you could use Click Catalyzer or your content boss, or we also, other features are our 4-minute feedback. So it's a really structured way to get feedback on parts of your show. Makes it really simple and easy, really quick to get really sort of specific feedback on parts of your show. Something that people have been loving a lot recently. Plus all of our courses, all of our resources. We've got our massive launch mastery course, growth mastery course, monetization mastery, all these things that me and Matthew have put in there over the last few years, many years. How long have we been running this now, Matthew? Like 10 years?
Yeah, it'll be about
something
that.
Like that. The Academy's been around since I think you started with me. So
since I was born.
Yeah. So go over to thepodcasthost.com/academy. That's thepodcasthost.com/academy to get all of this coaching and education. All right. Will we finish up with the wee extra as well, Matthew?
Yeah, and if this was the news, and finally, the feel-good story, well, for us anyway, I don't know about you listening. WWDC, Apple's, it's called Worldwide Developer Conference, isn't it? I did not know that until recently, but what happened on that?
It's the big massive Apple keynote. Like people often don't know what WWDC is, but it's like Apple run this conference, literally a conference for developers for the Apple ecosystem. So if you create games or apps for iPhones on iOS or for Macs, then you're encouraged to come along to this, and they share like new tech and tips and loads of talks and stuff like that. But they always do a keynote every single year where they announce what's coming next with Apple. So when you've seen in the news like iPhone 17 will have blah, 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 or new Mac announced, it's nearly always at this. And it happens every year. And it's usually a kind of big event for, tech fanboys, all that kind of stuff. It's kind of interesting to some people interested in Macs as well. But this year, amazingly, we got featured in it, which was brilliant. So we've been doing some work with the Safari team around making Alitu more compatible with Safari. So Alitu's always worked really nicely on Chrome because Chrome's been kind of the leading browser on a technology standpoint. It always has the most cutting edge browser tech. And with Alitu, we have like audio editing in there. We've got transcriptions, we've got call recording. All of these things require like the most leading tech you can get. So we build it around Chrome because that's the best experience we can give people. But Safari has always been lagging a little bit, and therefore we often tell people don't use Safari, essentially, because it doesn't really work as well. Like more glitches, more bugs, more things go wrong. And if anything's going wrong, generally, we always say, first thing, what browser do you use? And they go, Safari. All right, you got to change. But Apple are trying to change this, essentially. So this is maybe the kind of benefit for the listener, Matthew, is to know that there's a lot more great apps coming for Apple ecosystem for iOS in the future, because Apple are making such an effort to make Safari work much more nicely with like cutting edge tech. And so we were working with the Safari team themselves to make Alitu work really nicely with Safari. We were sharing our bugs with them. They were actually fixing things in Safari based on little glitches that we were having with Alitu. And we've got it working really nicely. And actually, when the new iOS comes out in September, I think it is, so iOS 26, which is for phones and computers, Alitu is going to work really, really nicely on all of those platforms from then on, including iPad, which is really cool. But because of that work we did, as part of that announcement around the new iOS, they actually included us. They put a big picture of Alitu on the screen and said something along the lines of, so with iOS 26, you'll be able to use all of your favorite creator apps with no problems, just like Alitu here. Which was amazing. It was really cool to see that. And it's on a stage of like seen by hundreds of millions of people, I believe.
Yeah, surreal.
So yeah, really cool. Yeah.
So when did you find out about that? Was it like the next day or that?
The next morning, yeah. Bran actually stayed up to watch it because we had the slightest suggestion. They were very secretive about it. They didn't tell us what was going to happen, but they were like, we've got this marketing opportunity coming up. We want to get you involved in. Would you be up for it? All we need from you is to get this kind of screenshot and just your agreement that that's okay. And we're like, well, I don't know what you're doing, so I don't know how I can agree to it, but you're Apple, so basically, yeah, okay. So we had no idea, but because it was leading up to WWDC, we thought, I wonder if it's that. And Brand's kind of interested anyway, because he's a big Apple fan.
I thought you were going to say a nerd.
Apple nerd. So he popped it into our Slack channel in the background. And let us all know, which was really cool.
Yeah, really cool. Really cool.
Alrighty. Great stuff. So I hope that was useful to you out there listening. I hope it gave you some tips around how to potentially walk that line between, clickbaity, attention-grabbing headlines without, the difference between, attention-grabbing, but legit versus clickbaity headlines. And I hope it gave you a couple of tips around maybe if you're creating products or a community as well, around how you might be able to improve them and add more value for your community. Any final words, Matthew?
Yeah, I've never felt less capable of talking than on this episode. I kind of put it down to, and if I'd known this in advance, I'd have just said we can't do the episode. But my daughter, she's had me up since 2 a.m, a time you should never see. So she was I think she'd had a couple of wee nightmares, and I couldn't get back to sleep then, and so I just ended up getting up and starting my day really early. But I didn't realise until we hit that big red button, I was like, I can't speak, I can't do it, can't say words. So I've kind of, apologies to the listener, I've kind of bungled my way through, and Colin, you've done an admirable job of carrying me as well. So.
I've had a few trips as well, so don't worry at all. Well, I'm interested to hear, listener out there, if you're listening, if you're listening, I presume you are at this point. Let us know. Give us some feedback. We have our Podcraft listener space on our IndiePod community. So pop in there. Go to indiepod.thepodcasthost.com. You can actually see I mentioned the Academy earlier. You can see the Academy landing page, see a demo of the Academy if you want to check out the features in there as well. But pop into the Podcraft listener space and let us know. Was Matthew bungling this episode?
Yeah, type in, this was the dumbest co-host I've ever heard.
But yeah, seriously, we'd love to hear your feedback. But yeah, feel free to let us know if you thought you could notice Matthew's 2 a.m. brain today. That'd be good to know. Good stuff. Link in the show notes if you need it. Perfect. All right. Thank you out there for listening. We won't string this out anymore because Matthew is currently needing to go and lie down. We'll talk to you next time. Cheers.